It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. How you doing today? Welcome to Emil Amok's Takeout. Our takes on all things considerable. This is the what I call the micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs and the ALLs. We talk about everything. Well, not everything, but things that most talk shows don't talk about. But we talk about the other things too because we care about that. We care. Did you go? I knew they were going to fake us out when they said there was going to be tests available from the government on Wednesday. They were going to open up a website, which, of course, makes us all kind of like, ooh, a government website. Oh, I hope it's not like the IRS website. But we were a little skittish, like, oh, what could this possibly mean? But in fact, you can get your COVID tests. The government promised you a set of tests, 4 tests, so you get 2, because I don't know exactly if it's going to be this one, but this is one I bought online. But you can get two of these, so that's 4 tests free from the government. All you got to do is you got to go to the website. Let's see, what is the website, Emil? At www.covidtests.gov, and just click on all the things, covidtests.gov, and get your freebie. They've been promising it. Here's the thing about these tests. If you're going to go back into life, you need these tests. You got to have these tests. And I don't know how you could go back into life without, feeling like all you're doing is crossing your fingers. Now, I just heard that a not so big friend of the show, he's not really a friend of the show. We talk about him because we disliked what he said about Shohei Ohtani during a Major League Baseball season. But Stephen A. Smith was talking about how he was in the hospital with 103-degree temperature, and he was saying that they told him that if he wasn't vaccinated, he wouldn't be here. But he survived because he was vaccinated. Okay, so great. Are you vaxxed? That's your lesson. Get vaccinated. But the other thing is, vaccinated, wear your mask. But we need these tests if we're going to go back out into life, because how would you know otherwise? I mean, I know the tests aren't perfect, but you get something with 80 to 90-degree certainty and you don't have any symptoms, then actually you really should take it only if you have symptoms, because that's when you are certain that you got the tests are working. Sometimes if you're asymptomatic, the tests aren't as good. But my point is, how can you go back into life without having access to these tests? And they're only going to give you 4. So it's imperfect. We need more tests available. And if they are available, then I think I might feel more comfortable getting out there, getting out of my closet. But for now, I'm in my closet. And I go out to do things that I have to do. If I lived closer to San Francisco's Chinatown, I'd be at Portsmouth Square tonight, because that's a big deal. Michelle Go, the woman who was pushed off a subway platform in New York City, she grew up in the Bay Area. She's from Fremont. And there's going to be a vigil tonight at Portsmouth Square, San Francisco's Chinatown. If you don't know Portsmouth Square, it's the park right above the big parking garage right, in Chinatown. It's where I usually park when I go to Chinatown. And when I go into the city and I have friends in North Beach, that's where I usually park. So I know where Portsmouth Square is. And it's outdoors and it's at 6 p.m. today, a candlelight vigil to honor. But I think I'm just going to honor her with some silent prayer. Michelle Go. It's impacting the Asian American community, this murder. It's impacting from coast to coast. People in New York are horrified by it because if you're out and about and you depend on the subways in New York, you're masked, you're distanced. Hopefully, you have some tests, but generally, you're reliant on the subway. And if the subways are dangerous because there are people out there lurking and pushing people while you're waiting for a train, and this happened at 9:40 a.m. in the morning on Saturday, then what kind of city, what kind of society do we live in? This is a big deal for Eric Adams, the new mayor of New York City. And as I said, he's addressing this with Asian American leaders, has been since Saturday. We had, I saw a thing he did with Grace Meng, the group that I'm affiliated with and work with, close relationship. The Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund said in a statement, this is Margaret Fung, executive director of ALDEF. This latest attack causing the death of an Asian American woman in the Times Square subway station is particularly horrifying for our community. These attacks have left Asian Americans across the city and across the country feeling vulnerable, and they must stop. And this is the truth. I mean, it's coincidental that Michelle Go is from California, grew up in American High School in Fremont, one of the best high schools in the Bay Area, right? She went on to get her bachelor's degree at UCLA, economics and public policy, then went back east to get her MBA. She worked with Deloitte, I believe. And she decided that New York was it. And it's so sad. Saturday morning, this 40-year-old woman out and about doing her thing, pushed from behind. And if you've seen the video, they caught the guy, Simon Marshall, 61. There was no interaction between the two before, according to police, according to reports. Apparently, he had threatened some other people. He was just a person who had mental health issues. That was reported by his family. People, and he's chronically homeless. I heard Eric Adams, the mayor, talk about the idea of Kendra's Law, which was supposed to help prevent something like this. And if you know anything about Kendra's Law, you know that Kendra's Law was started back in, 1999. The event happened where Kendra Webdale was pushed in front of a subway train. She was killed. And they started Kendra's Law to make sure that families of people who have mental health issues had help, so that if they had family members who could not get the help they needed, well, now they can get the help they needed. It was there to help not the victims, not Kendra Webdale, but to prevent another Kendra Webdale because of a person mentally unstable who pushed her off. And for Webdale, it was a schizophrenic who had been convicted before and had been serving a 25 years to life sentence. And so there was a need to, how do you deal? I mean, the man ultimately ended up serving, he pled to 23 years, followed by 5 years of supervision. And this was in 2006. So he's still in, I believe, to the best of my knowledge. But the law was named for the victim, Kendra Webdale, to make sure that no one else would have to suffer at the hands of someone who had some kind of mental impairment, but had not gotten the treatment or was not helped by his family, or, it's complicated because you need help. You're in the mental health system, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it, because apparently institutions, public institutions specifically, cherry pick the kind of people they help so that their records are enhanced. They can say, "Oh, look at how helpful to the community we've been. We're actually making a difference." Well, yeah, if you take only the easiest cases, as has been the implication. So Kendra's Law was thought to be an important advance. It was going to help people who had mental health challenges, make sure that they could benefit from this. They didn't have to, they could get help before doing something dangerous. But a lot of people say, "Hey, I don't know if this is really helpful," because now we put this in the public policy debate, and people who like this say, "Hey, look," and they've done studies. They say Kendra's Law has reduced homelessness by 74%. Great. How about the 25 or 30%, the other people who stay homeless? Oh, it reduced suicide attempts by 55%. Yeah, but that's like a coin flip practically. It reduced substance abuse by 48%. I'm reading from some of these studies. They're heralding Kendra's Law. And that's kind of like a coin flip, too. Reduced physical harm to others, 47%. Kind of a coin flip, also. Where it really has helped, it's reduce incarceration. Yeah, because we let people go, right? It's reduced arrest. Yeah, because we just like try not to get in the way. 83%. It's reduced hospitalization by 77%. Yeah, because hospitals don't want these people. So clearly, after some 20 years, Kendra's Law, which is called New York's Law for Assisted Outpatient Treatment, isn't nearly as effective as it could be, because, well, it's up to the courts, right? And then the courts, they are doing as well as they can, but cases slip through the cracks. It doesn't help family members and caregivers totally. People are allowed a certain amount of their civil liberties, but if they have mental health issues, they still have a choice of not take their meds, not go to treatment. They still have this they still have their issues and they still can be a danger to other people. So I don't know what the answer is. More money into public services to help people who are in need? But clearly, they've known about things like this, where people with mental health illnesses are in the subways and they pose a danger to people like Michelle Go. I mean, we talk about the law. I mean, you just go to the New York Times and put down subway victims and they just come up. This is not a new thing. I mean, Kendra Webdale in 1999 was a journalist and photographer. She was just 32 at the time. When she died, because she was pushed by this man who was described as schizophrenic by medical experts, well, something had to be done. Not necessarily for Kendra, but for future people with mental health challenges so they aren't a danger. Well, it's great, but how do you prevent another Kendra Webdale? You help out the people with mental health challenges, but how do you make sure there's not another Kendra Webdale? And like I said, you go through the archives. This is from 2012. Subway victim recalled, as always, lending a hand. It's about a guy, Sanando Sen, pushed onto subway tracks in Queens by a young woman who had suffered mental illness, was receiving psychiatric treatment, and told police that she'd shoved Mr. Sen onto the tracks because she believed he was a Hindu or Muslim. And she wanted to retaliate for the attacks of 9/11. This was in 2012. It's 10 years ago. And now we have Michelle Go. I mean, I don't want to be insensitive to the needs of people who are mentally unstable and who have mental health issues. I know about mental health issues. People close to me. I know these are important matters. It's a matter of severity in some of these cases, but you never know. You can't tell when something is going to happen. Simon Marshall, who was arrested in connection with the death of Michelle Go, he was free, but people knew. People knew when they brought him in and arrested him on Saturday. They knew his situation. So it's especially tough right now because of the thousands of attacks against Asian Americans across the country. More than 10,000 across the country since the pandemic began, according to Stop AAPI Hate, the group that's the primary group that's looking at all these instances and compiling the data. This is a serious time. So I don't really know the way out. I don't know if we gave more money to the state hospitals, the treatment centers, would it help these people? Would it help these people if it was their choice to not take their meds, to not do what's right? I mean, Kendra's law was put forth so that people could get help without being committed. They could get help before they became really dangerous. you had to require them to accept treatment. That was supposedly the beauty of Kendra's law. But clearly, it's only part of the answer. And as I said, I don't know what is the full answer here. I just know it's sad to read about Michelle Alyssa Go pushed to her death at the Times Square subway station last week on Saturday. Sad because as it happened in New York over the weekend, I knew when they listed her in earlier reports as being from the Bay Area, I knew that at some point the story would hit the Bay Area, as it did late yesterday and today for the first time. And now the candlelight vigil in honor of Go tonight, 6 p.m. Pacific at Portsmouth Square in San Francisco's Chinatown. There's going to be another vigil concurrent to that in New York. And so we'll see what, and the mayor, I'm told, is set to speak, Mayor Eric Adams in New York. And this is a big deal in New York City, especially as people are trying to get back into the swing of things, even though Omicron has spread or continues to spread throughout the country. New York, which sort of, this is a lagging thing where, they got it first and now it sort of sweeps through the country. They're seeing their instances of COVID going down. So now people are saying, oh, I can go back out. I can start doing things again. Well, maybe. But now, besides COVID, there is this thing called how do you make sure the city truly is safe from things like what happened to Michelle Go? I just know that if I were an Asian person, male or female, doesn't matter, and I was out in the city, I don't know if I would take public transit. And yet it's the most convenient. It's, you jump in the subway in New York. That's just what you do. Never thought about taking the bus, but maybe the bus is the better option. I don't know. Oh, what everyone does. They walk within the city. But if you're going from Times Square to Brooklyn or to Queens, not so easy. I know. Candlelight Vigil, Michelle Go. The family released a statement. We are in a state of shock and grieving the loss of our daughter, sister, friend. We hope Michelle will be remembered for how she lived and not just how she died. She was beautiful, brilliant, kind, an intelligent woman who loved her family and friends, loved to travel the world, and to help others. She made and kept up with countless friends from grade school to college to graduate school and at her workplaces. Her friends would tell us that Michelle was smart, funny, big-hearted, and a real role model. I know women like Michelle Go. I know people like that. And it saddens me. Saddens me to read about this. And, the thing is, because Marshall, the guy who has been arrested, is black, and, Go is Asian, they are investigating whether or not it is a hate crime, but I don't think it's going to be seen as a hate crime because it seems he was just looking for a victim and not necessarily an Asian victim. But this is really an instance where, well, hate is hate. An act is an act. We just take it on its absolute value that you don't necessarily need a hate crime charge against Marshall, but we need something to be done. And we need to be mindful of the Asian American community because we have this thing concurrently going on where, as I said, 10,000 instances of hate have gone on. What, and what the answer is. This is why you need a sense of community. This is why, and how the policymakers, how they take care of this. I mean, this should be something that concerns everyone who takes a subway, everyone who's in public, everyone who feels threatened just by the idea. Look, the virus, you can feel threatened by the virus. You don't see that, but these people out in the street who have mental health challenges, and it happens anywhere where there's homelessness, right? Because one of the big things about the people who support Kendra's law is they say, hey, this cuts down on homelessness, reduces it by 74%. Isn't it great? Well, yeah, but there's still about a third out there. What about them? The danger's still there. We have to go to the issue of treating people and finding the way to do it. So, I just don't know the. I got the word that the guy who used to be my congressman in California's 9th congressional district isn't running again. Jerry McNerney, 70 years old. He's a math PhD. He beat Dick Pombo way back when he first got into office. But this is why we elect people. He's not my congressman anymore because of redistricting. I got shoved off into another area, but I was thinking, people who are in office, Congress, local leaders, state leaders, this is why you go in office. You go in office to solve problems. And this situation about public safety and this Michelle Go situation, this is a problem. Mental health, this is a problem. How are we going to deal with it? How do we deal with it? Pump more money into the mental health system? So, not an easy thing. But if you are in San Francisco and are vaccinated, boosted, and masked, consider going down to San Francisco's Chinatown with the family. Michelle Go will hold a candlelight vigil tonight, 6 p.m. Pacific. And I think concurrently, there will be something going on in New York. Because we need an answer for this. We definitely need an answer. Now, in Congress, I believe they're taking up the Voting Rights Act. They're going to start it up. Biden is going to have his have a press conference tomorrow, Wednesday, to kind of jumpstart his administration. Some people say, "Oh, it's a little weird. The Democrats are bringing voting rights to the Congress when essentially it's dead, right? Unless you get Manchin and Sinema to end the filibuster. Well, then the Republicans will filibuster the two voting rights bills to death, and it'll never get passed," which is true. But this is the tactic that I mentioned yesterday. It seems like it's the logical thing. Let's get the people who are against you voting. Let's get it on the record. We shouldn't have a democracy where we have an entire party, the Republicans, who want to take away your right to vote. Oh, Emil, come on, you're they don't want to take away the right to vote. They just want the feds not to be in charge. They want to make it a states' rights issue. Well, states' rights. Then we have officials at the Republican Party who want to make sure that your vote is taken away like state by state. We need to know who these people are who are anti-democracy, because democracy relies on the vote. We need people voting. We don't need people not voting. So I think it's a good move on the part of the Democrats. They're going to lose. They may not get the vote, or they may get a vote, but they may not get it passed. But if you get a vote, you could say, "Oh, look, Smith, Jones, Watson, all these people, they're against real people voting." And that's what the Democrats want. They want to pass these voting rights bills that will make it easy for Americans to vote. Shouldn't be that hard. But let's get it on record. Let's get the names of the people who are against democracy, and then call them super hypocrites for wanting to be leaders in our democracy. What kind of leaders are those? People who don't want citizens to vote. Voting rights, right? That's why Joe Biden last week called it Jim Crow 2.0. You see the front pages of the paper today. You see MLK Day March. They did not have a typical celebration of MLK Day, but they marched, just like they marched in Selma. Selma was all about voting rights. And soon after Selma, certainly LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, passed the Voting Rights Act, got it done, 1965, and here we are, all these years later, more than 50 years later, thinking, "Oh, we've got it made." The fight for voting rights is never ending. I mean, that was the lesson. And the sooner we get that vote, the sooner we'll be able to move forward, identify the people who are anti-democracy, and try to make our society better. That's the reset for the Democrats. I mean, they're doing this for one reason, too, because they've polled. Of course, everyone polls to figure out what they should do. And the Democrats know this is a popular issue among the so-called Democratic base. Voting rights. It's really what kicked off everything. Civil rights, voting rights. You want to take it away? That's un-American. Un-American. So that's the Democrats setting up the agenda. Let's find out who the real un-American people are in Congress who vote for taking away your vote. Some people say, "Oh, the Republicans, we just see it as a states' the states' rights. Yeah, they should handle it in the states. The federal government shouldn't be in charge of. Well, who's going to come up with the common sense if not the federal government? Who's going to protect us all? Or maybe we're just going back to the way it was pre 1965. Well, if you're a person of color, you may not want to go in the South. Well, why not? It's America. Well, yeah, but it's different. It's different. America's America, right? That's why it's appropriate for the federal government to get involved here with the voting rights. It was important in 65. It was important when they renewed it in 2006. It's important now. And anyone who tells you otherwise has the heart of a Confederate. No mistake why they're calling the fight to take away your vote Jim Crow 2.0. It's not really mentioned much. I mean, Joe Biden said as much last week in that speech that I talked about. But, once you realize that, Jim Crow 2.0, yeah, we are going backwards. And we don't need to. We got to hold the line and actually make up for things that have been taken away in the last few years, including the Supreme Court ruling that gutted the Voting Rights Act and the federal oversight on laws that would make it hard for people of color to vote. That's what we have to do. All right, so a couple other things I want to mention before we end today's program. I told you I saw Shang-Chi. I'm a good Asian American. Someone said, now, Emil, you think Aquafina is hot? I think Aquafina is fetching. But when I said Aquafina was hot, I mean Aquafina is everywhere. She's everywhere. She's hot that way. She's hot. I mean, I like Aquafina. But when I meant she was hot, I meant she's everywhere. She's like the Asian every woman. I actually liked Simu Liu and the idea of martial arts movies. It's somewhat therapeutic. You go in there, you're an Asian American, you had a bad day. It's an update of, the Bruce Lee thing, and you can just play it and you're the hero. You've overcome. I know it's just a movie, but it's helpful versus, say, Crazy Rich Asians, where Asians were, it's a rom-com, and it was a good movie too, but there's more righteous butt kicking in Shang-Chi. And I now regret that I didn't see it sooner. But like I said, Omicron. Oh, no, well, it wasn't just Omicron. The pandemic. And I think every movie should be released at home, on streaming devices until we get a better handle on all this. And then, of course, I remember I told you about seeing Emil the monster. No, he wasn't a monster. He was a cage fight, a big monstrous cage fighter. He looked like a Shrek with a little bit of Hulk. I do recall him being green, and he got his butt kicked by a guy named Wong. So anyway, if you haven't seen, I'm sure you all have seen Shang-Chi, right? Because that's like part of being Asian American. Well, maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. It's not too late. Shang-Chi. It's on. I saw it on Disney Plus. You don't have to go into the theaters. Uh, Tongans, I mentioned Tongans yesterday. The latest on the Tongans is it was not as bad. I mean, it was bad. It was quite an eruption, like a once in a thousand years kind of eruption. But the reports, initial reports, are showing that, let's see, the report I saw, AP, the blast from the volcano could be heard in Alaska, and the waves cross the ocean to cause an oil spill and 2 drownings in Peru. The startling satellite images resembled a massive nuclear explosion, and yet, despite sitting almost on top of the volcano that erupted so violently on Saturday, the Pacific nation of Tonga appears to have avoided the widespread devastation that many initially feared. So, in its first update since the eruption, the government said Tuesday it has confirmed 3 deaths, 2 local residents, and a British woman. Concerns remain over the fate of people on 2 hard hit smaller islands where most houses were destroyed, it said. Communications have been down everywhere, making assessments more difficult. So basically, here's a Red Cross spokesperson said, "We did hold grave fears given the magnitude of what we saw in that unprecedented blast," said Katie Greenwood, the head of delegation in the Pacific for the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. "Fortunately, in those major population centers, we are not seeing the catastrophic effect we thought might happen, and that's very good news." Still, there is significant infrastructural damage around Tongatapu. And of course, all of this is hampered because we do not have the greatest communications from there to here, or to, it's still, communication is still sketchy, but it looks like it wasn't as bad as they feared. So I know there's a lot of Tongans in the Bay Area and in the United States. And if you're hearing me on the internet, maybe if you know otherwise, you can send something on chat. But the Red Cross has said it wasn't as bad as it looked. So we continue to keep our fingers crossed. All right, any other thing I wanted to mention? Okay, we know that Biden is giving his talk tomorrow, so we'll talk about that. Tomorrow, we also, let's see, for you sports fans, oh my God. I saw there was a little kerfuffle in social media about a tech website or tech webcast had an Asian guy who was a part owner. He was an investor in the Warriors, so he owns shares, but he's not a active participant day to day. But he said some things like, "No one cares about the Uyghurs," he said. And he's an Asian American guy, South Asian. He's a tech investor, so he had a kind of callousness and an arrogance to him. But basically, the thing that was offensive is he said, "Hey, no one cares about the Uyghurs. No one cares about, what China does or doesn't do and human rights and all that." And he came out with a statement saying he apologized for appearing lacking in empathy, which I think is probably the least you could say about his statements. There's something about people who have money and privilege, even if they are Asian American or South Asian. They and look, I don't understand the rich part. I'm not rich, but I'm sure he was just trying to be kind of, let me be blunt, let me be provocative. "No one cares about the Uyghurs," he said. in reference to the people who were being hammered by the Chinese in China, a minority in China. And, we know what the Chinese are capable of. We know that just from the past, right? How far do you want to go back? Tiananmen Square? You want to go back a couple weeks ago in Hong Kong? So we know people didn't call the Chinese leadership the butchers of Beijing for nothing. But the tech guy kind of backed down. The Warriors PR department came out with a statement saying this guy isn't part of the Warriors day to day. But this is what happens. You got you guys with the money, and they're identified as Warrior owner, and they're not Warrior. He's not a. He's a Warrior investor, a major Warrior investor, but not part of the day to day. Just like the San Francisco Giants, a team that I love, but I'm somewhat taken aback when the major owner of the Giants is this ultra right wing, pro Trump type of guy out of Florida. This is the thing about corporate sports. And right now, I say this as we are involved in football. We're in the throes of playoff football. Probably the only time football really matters. And there's this reminder that, man, it's all just big money. And I'm reminded about how great it is when I, as a small boy in the Mission District in San Francisco, was able to go out and play out in Dolores Park before anyone discovered it as a domestic park. It was a patch of grass in the concrete where us kids would play our games: baseball, soccer, football. And that's the joy of sports. I don't get to play that now. I get to watch it on TV on my big screen. But what do I remember? I remember being that 11-year-old kid wearing pads and hitting and running around and scoring touchdowns and doing it myself. And I remember when I see players in the huddle, I remember my huddles when I was 11 and 12 playing tackle football, being the Pop Warner MVP for my team. That's the football I remember. And I'm grateful that I had that time. To wear that girdle pad, you see how the football players, they have that kind of like, how do they have their butts look so smooth back there? Well, they get this girdle pad on. I had that experience when I was 12. I could relate. I know what it smells like in the huddle. No, it's great. It's great, when you have your chance to play, you have to play. And my chance to play was between 11 and 15. Because if I played now, I'd get killed. I would just. You saw Kyler Murray last night getting killed, and he's bigger than me, Kyler Murray. Yeah, that was quite a game for the Rams, beating up on the Arizona Cardinals. Did you know the thing about the Arizona Cardinal game that was interesting is Arizona was originally from St. Louis. They were the St. Louis Cardinals. The baseball Cardinals, Emil? No, they had a football Cardinals, and they moved from St. Louis to Arizona. And then there were the Rams, who were initially in LA, then moved to St. Louis and were the St. Louis Rams. And now they were playing in Arizona as the LA Rams because they moved from St. Louis to LA. And so only a true football nerd would think that was worth 3 seconds of, interesting. But that was what I found interesting about last night's game. It was not interesting as a football game. And now we go into the next week, and now people are talking about the 49ers against the Green Bay Packers. That should be fun. That should be fun on, I believe it's on Saturday they're playing. But anyway, we will see. We'll talk more sports. We always keep sports toward the end here because, we take care of the important stuff early on. Once again, a reminder that the Michelle Go Candlelight Vigil, 6 p.m. Tuesday, Portsmouth Square in San Francisco's Chinatown. FYI, if you're in the Bay Area, Michelle Go, who was killed in New York, pushed off a subway by a man with mental issues. He's been arrested. Michelle was from Fremont, graduated from American High School in 1998, went to UCLA, got her MBA in New York. I believe it was in New York. Said New York was her place. She called herself a proud Bruin, but she was dedicated to New York. Lived in the Upper West Side. And the family said, let's hope she's remembered for more than how she died, but how she lived. So I'm going to be at the vigil virtually, at least thinking about them, in Portsmouth Square in San Francisco. That's tonight. All right, so that's it for a show. I know it's one of those times when we're betwixt in between, right? We're waiting for that sign that says, hey, we're done with Omicron, but we're not done with Omicron yet. And I think one of the things is that we're all getting a little tired of our current status. So tomorrow, I'll talk more about this idea that, because people are talking about, hey, what about this social contract? We should be able to live life with the disease. Well, easy for you to say. You think? I mean, if you don't have comorbidities, perhaps. If you're not in an age bracket that is endangered, perhaps. I think we need to fight this fight together still. I'll talk about that tomorrow. If you are here at this point of the show, this is my favorite time where I just say, hey, look, attaboy. Pat yourself in the back. You belong. You're worthy. Don't let them tell you otherwise. You're MVP. Walk through that door of shame into the room of love. Apply some to yourself first. Thank you for being here. Tune in tomorrow. This is the show I call Emil Muck's Takeout. My takes on, as I say, all things considerable. We're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific Live. Yeah. And you can read my columns on ALDEF, aaldf.org/blog, the ALDF blog. Follow us on Twitter, at Emil Amok. See more at amok.com. If you are on Facebook, friend us, like us, give me a heart, throw me something. And if you're old school and want to email Emil, EMIL, at amok.com. So, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you be happy. And may you live with ease. Till tomorrow. Emil Guillermo here. Mahal